So today's session is around wraparound support with TED. So what I mean by that really is sort of the additional support on top of outside of your normal support that I talk about in your original accreditation training. So in addition to things like your team leader training, that coaching support that you might give, and some of that resource signposting, what opportunities are there, and what are we actually looking to achieve with that support? So how can we do that in a mindful way? And I think sometimes it's important to be mindful of not overstepping our support as well, and really trying to be quite tactful in the way we offer that support, because one of the big things we want to do with TED is build that capability. So if we overstep too much, we run the risk of disempowering team leaders. So it's really sort of fine balance, and the answer can be different for different teams. But today's session is about identifying those sustainable support mechanisms, reviewing different opportunities for additional support, and understanding how that TED cycle can provide some structure for both yourselves as OD practitioners and support practitioners, and for teams and team leaders who are using TED. So when I talk about the aims of any support that we're giving, the aim of TED is really to empower teams to work on their own engagement. In a perfect world, which we know we're a long way from, but in a perfect world, we'd like something which meant that all teams could work on engagement themselves. They felt confident enough to do that, and they had the skills to do it, and they really sort of embraced that sort of approach to have these regular team-based conversations. However, we know the starting point for many teams can be one of uncertainty, where team leaders might lack the confidence or the skills to navigate the TED approach successfully. So our role as practitioners is to help encourage that confidence whilst building the capabilities, and really supporting that ability to be able to run a team coaching session, which is essentially what TED is, help enhance the facilitation skills, but also provide them some guidance and some structure to action planning and that continuous improvement process. So these three themes are what I'm going to focus on throughout today's session, and look at different support mechanisms and how they achieve these three different elements to different amounts. In my experience, and from talking to a lot of you as well, when you've been rolling out TED, the challenge we have is quite often the culture in NHS organisations, and this isn't unique to any one of our organisations. I've definitely seen this in our trust, but I've talked with a lot of you around that culture of sometimes teams just want to outsource engagement, and I think sometimes this can be born out of team leaders feeling that they've not got the expert skills for this type of work, so they don't feel they've got the capability to do it, or they haven't got the confidence to do it. But sometimes it might be influenced also by the lack of time as well, and feeling that it's just easier to outsource it. So our challenge with TED support really is to convince team leaders that in most cases, you don't actually need to be an expert to do this. You don't need to be a qualified OD professional. You don't need to have facilitated loads of sessions before. You just need to have a basic structure and start doing it, and then you can build on that each time you do it. We also want to try and convince team leaders that the time that they spend on engagement can have a greater lasting impact with their teams, as it helps to build relationships and create that shared accountability across the team at all levels. And I think this was one of the big drivers when we first developed TED. We wanted to really get away from an OD approach, which was come in and run a bespoke session for every team request that we got, because what we were seeing at Blanks Teaching was that quite often that might have an initial impact on a team, and that it might really energize them in the short term, but in the longer term, once you've stepped back that OD support, quite often teams will then slip back into their old ways, or they'll struggle to keep that momentum. So a big part of the TED approach is embedding that continuous improvement cycle so that teams can build on this and keep going even once we sort of step back our support. So it's important to keep that in mind as we think about different support mechanisms. So the TED journey cycle, it sets out this framework for continuous improvement. So it provides this step-by-step framework of a team journey that can provide any team leader, regardless of their experience or their level in the organization. It gives them a structure to start engagement work with their team. And the cyclical nature of this gives them tools to help them plan the next steps. It helps them take action. So the toolkits help them to be able to do that, but it gives them a structure to be able to reflect and learn from that. And one of the things that I find myself a lot at the minute when we're asking teams to do repeat TEDs is really to reflect on what maybe didn't work in your first TED cycle. What could you improve still? And what can you build on? What are those things that really did work that you really want to embed as best practice when you next come to TED? So we know, and from my experience, I've seen that when teams engage with the TED process again and again, each cycle becomes a little bit more successful than the last. And that's really what that continuous improvement approach is about. Last year, I did run a lunch and learn session focused on continuous improvement. And I referenced the Plan, Do, Study, Act, so your PDSA cycle, and that value of compound learning over time. So it's really this power that we're trying to get teams to tap into. It is important, however, to acknowledge that the first time a team goes through this journey, and I know a lot of you some of you might be quite new to TED, most of your teams will be doing this for the first time. This is often the time when you get asked for a lot of support. So it's really important to think around how can we give that support to set them up with the best foundation, but also without disempowering them or making them feel like this is something which we would do for them as OD practitioners. So it's a really fine balance to get, I think, and that's something I want to really sort of keep in mind as we go throughout today. Questions on that? Oh, sorry, I flipped 2 slides ahead there. So in accreditation training sessions, I reference these typical ways that we support teams. So these are sort of the standard things we do at Lancs Teaching. So first off, your team leader training is perhaps the most important part of getting this right. If you can get across in your team leader training the importance of that continuous improvement process, as well as the practicalities of setting up your survey, interpreting your results, and then also some advice on navigating a team conversation, then you're setting your team leaders up with the best possible foundation to be able to go ahead and do this. And the hope is that a lot of teams, that will be enough for them. And what this really does is it helps to maximize your support because you're giving that one-off training session, and then although you're going to be there for them, most of the time a team leader would be able to just have a go at this and run with it. I've highlighted coaching and signposting as well as other main support mechanisms, because these are other ways that we can help to build that confidence and that capability and still empower team leaders to be in control of it. So they're in charge, they're running TED in the way they want to, and they're also in charge of that learning process as well. So if it doesn't run quite the way that they want to the first time, that's okay. Have another go at it, review, reflect, see what's changed over time, and the team leader and the team will grow in confidence each time they do it. However, with that in mind, we know there are different points around this where teams might drop off. And I know from speaking to a lot of you, there are times where you might deliver the best team leader training in the world, but then somewhere along the line, a team gets stuck, or they hit a road bump or a hurdle. So I just wanted to ask for your input at this point. Where do you see drop off? And feel free to pop your hand up or pop it in the chat. Claire, would you like to come in?
Hi, yeah. Typically, it tends to be actually they've had the training, they know that they need to do the input of the names, but it stops there because actually they lose momentum and they don't want to. So we're finding we're having to kind of pick up with a lot of them and say, look, we'll input the names and press launch,
okay,
and then pick up with you afterwards. So I think there's that, because obviously we haven't got the bulk upload facility yet. And then classically, it's when the reports come through, you know, we've helped them interpret it, we've shown them where the resources are, but then things seem to go a bit quiet in terms of that initial TED discussion, either because they're frightened or because, I guess, as a trust at the moment, we're under a lot of scrutiny. So, you know, they're being pulled in lots of directions. And what we're trying to engage them to see is that actually, you know, obviously they're already sat in spaces with staff, be it team meetings, you know, be it management supervision. They don't have to do anything big bang and bolt on to do the TED feedback. Actually, it makes sense to feed this into existing forums. You know, and if actually, you know, for example, if there isn't, you know, the space within one team meeting, or there isn't the capacity to have an extended team meeting that excludes the operational stuff, well, then why don't you use management supervision to go, you know, on an individual basis to kind of gather feedback from the reports, bring it all together, and then communicate it out to staff and say, right, I've spoken to you all now. This seems to be what's coming. Do you know what I mean? It's just kind of imploring them to see that, you know, this is supposed to be helping them. It's not something extra to do, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Can definitely agree with both of those points. I think firstly around that bulk upload, absolutely, I agree that that's one of our sort of features that we most want to get into the system. So absolutely, that's something we're working on, because that is perhaps one of the most onerous parts of the actual setup process, typing in all those names and emails. The thing I'm always trying to get across to team leaders is, remember, you only do this the first time, and when you come to do it again, you'll just be adding any new names or removing any names who's left the team since last time you did it. So yeah, it's just helping them through that first bit of I suppose technical knowledge, and really I think sometimes it's best for team leaders to have a go at this, because sometimes you can think that it's a bit more technical than it is. So I think just having a go at it and getting through that first one, again, if you can help them through that, then they're on the way with it. On your second point there, I think definitely that concern sometimes of when they get the feedback, then feeling a bit overwhelmed, you know, particularly if it's the first time a team leader has had feedback like this, feeling a bit as if, oh gosh, how do I deal with that? I think a few people mentioned in the chat before about sometimes there'll be issues outside of your control, and for a team leader, you want to help your team as much as possible, but when they're raising concerns about something which is outside your sphere of control, it's really difficult to be able to deal with that. So,
and I guess if they're already feeling overwhelmed as well, that you then maybe worry about, you know, opening up Pandora's box and making things worse. It's not that they don't want that improvement within the team, but they're concerned about being able to absorb it, because even though obviously this is a team decision making tool, I think classically we're very hierarchical in the NHS, so they're still very much of the mindset that, you know, this feedback's all on them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a big pressure for team leaders. And I think to a certain extent, that's where something like coaching support can really help, and that knowledge that they can go to someone to talk to about this feedback and really sort of get a grasp of it before they go back to the team, because it can be very easy for a team leader to take all of that weight on their own shoulders. And I think something I often talk to team leaders about is remembering that it's the team has a responsibility to work on this as well. It's not all on you as a team leader. What TED's about is really about acknowledging those things, those challenges, those strengths and areas for improvement in the team, but thinking around, okay, what is it that we can all do to help this out? and it's not all on a team leader's shoulders. And definitely the first time a team leader goes through this, that can be a difficult sort of culture change for them to navigate. So yeah, great point. Thanks, Claire. I've noticed a few have been coming through the chat. I'll come back to those in a minute. Chloe, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, we've actually found that at the very end of our training that we do for the managers, we've asked them to kind of commit to, even if it's a loose timescale of when it is they're planning to send out their TED and when they're planning to have the feedback discussion. And so we've tried to be preemptive in then adding a calendar invite between their coach and them, which just seems to help focus them without putting too much pressure on them. It just seems to help kind of get to them at the right time and make sure that they are actually, you know, that there aren't any blockers that maybe we could help to kind of remove for them, but kind of just encouraging them along the way. But the thing where we find kind of the drop off happens is probably after the feedback to the team. So we've kind of kept that momentum up following the training. They've had a look at the report, they fed it back to the team, and then it kind of goes quiet. So we've tried to work with our managers on sharing tips around ways to kind of keep TED alive after just that initial feedback discussion, but that tends for us to be the place where it drops off.
Yeah, great points there. Thanks, Chloe. And I think that's a really good idea around with your team leader training. Try and pin them down to a date. Then they've sort of got that solid commitment then to keep to have a go at it and to commit to doing the survey. And I suppose that helps you with your support as well, because I guess you could take note of those dates, and if you're not seeing that activity, it gives you a prompt to maybe check in with them and just ask, is everything okay? Is have you hit any barriers, or is there anything we can help with? So I do think that's a really good idea. And I think, again, we're talking about future developments, but that's part of the reason we're also in the not too distant future introducing a user report where you can then be able to see when users last logged in and if they've set up a survey. So it'll give you more tools to be able to just give that polite, gentle nudge. It's not about pushing them into it. It's about just reminding them, oh, you've done TED training, have you had any success with it, and trying to just keep nudging them, because we know how hard it is for lots of our team leaders, that they will go into this with the best possible intentions. They'll want to do it, but then when they get back to the day job and they're really stretched and things come in that they perhaps hadn't accounted for, their plans can change. So anything we can do to keep the momentum for them is really important. On your other point, I think after the feedback, definitely, and when a team's perhaps set an action plan, sometimes that work can drop off. And I think in my experience, sometimes that's because teams are maybe a little bit too ambitious with what they want to achieve. They'll set themselves some really lofty targets, but then when they don't quite achieve them, or they're struggling to get traction with them, they decide, oh well, we'll just ignore it and we'll not go back to TED because we know we haven't achieved what we set out to do. So again, that's an opportunity to perhaps give them that nudge and just say, okay, it's okay if you don't achieve everything you set out to do. If anything, that's an opportunity to reflect on, maybe we were a bit too ambitious that first time. Maybe we want to really scale it back and think around what are the fundamentals of what we want to get right. So yeah, I agree with you that, again, the two common drop-off points. I'm going to come to Jude now, because I think you've been monitoring the chat for us, Jude. Are there any themes cropping up?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I think Claire from East Kent has commented on what you were just discussing before, and she's suggested a great idea that she shares the information for team slides with team leaders and encourages them to be open about the survey, and also encourages leaders to pitch as this is our TED. Exactly what you were saying, Lee. It's a real team effort. It's not the manager deciding and then leading the team. It's everybody's got a voice. So it's a great point there from Claire. And we've also got Sam from Blackpool. She said one of the barriers is a lack of responses from their team or organising their team feedback session.
Yeah, really, really good points. I think first on your point, Claire, around that, I think you just highlighted how important it is, that initial conversation with the team and getting that language right, and really sort of really trying to energize the team around, okay, this is how we're going to use it, this is why it's important, and also getting some of those key points right around, this is an anonymous survey, it's not something which is going to be held against us if things are wrong, so be as open and honest, but also be really clear with the team that they will be the ones responsible for working on it. You know, it's around everyone in the team working on it. Second point, thanks, Sam, around getting that uptake. I think definitely that can be a barrier the first time a team goes into this, and I think sometimes it is important to manage expectations, that the first time you go into TED, most teams I don't see getting 100% response rate the first time they do it, unless they're a smaller team where it's perhaps a bit more achievable. But definitely if you have a bigger team, it might be more realistic to aim for, say, 60-70%. And if you've got a team that is really struggling to get that uptake, then it might be a case of, let's use the data that we have got, even if it's only a small percentage of the team, but let's have our first TED conversation around the topic of why do we think people feel they can't give feedback through this? What are those barriers? And that might be the topic that you base your first TED discussion on. And the hope would be, and definitely what I see in a lot of teams, is that when you come round to do your second or third one, you've started to build up some of that confidence in the process, that team members feel more able to give feedback because they're reassured that it is anonymous, that it is something which will get talked about, it will actually make a difference. So I think there's a lot of value in keeping that momentum, and even if the first time doesn't go as well as you would like, or as the team leader would like, it's important to follow it through, and try and keep that momentum and build it over time. Any other points, Jude?
Yeah, exactly. It's that momentum, isn't it? It's like Kim from North Cumbria said, it's tended to be after the training, but not a lot, but a small part after the training. But we've done the training and then nothing further happens. And Oliver has got, I think we sometimes see a drop off in introduced to your team. Leaders will hopefully set up and send out a survey after they've attended the training, but as they don't always socialize TED with their teams, their response rate can be low.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what this does highlight is the importance of that team leader session, but definitely that opportunity to maybe have that follow up a few weeks down the line after that initial team leader session. Maybe those opportunities for team leaders to come back to you if there's maybe a concern that they haven't thought about in the initial training. And some of those things I'll go into as we go throughout some of the things today. Claire, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Claire and Mark. Claire and Mark have got some ideas as well that they'd like to contribute there. So, Claire.
Yeah, myself and some of my colleagues have put together some virtual drop-in sessions, which aren't exclusive to people who, only those managers who've accessed the training. But I mean, I guess they're our target audience. So obviously, we gather the data on those people that have accessed our training, either through our flagship OD program, because obviously we offer TED on that, but also the bespoke sessions as well. So myself and my colleagues would put our heads together and thought, if we were managers in this situation, what might we wobble over, and what might we actually kind of really appreciate a safe space to kind of meet with other managers and with OD to kind of talk about. So we've kept it quite basic, really. So the first one is, logging on after your training, finding your report, being able to kind of identify, how many people have responded, being able to see where the deadline is, but also, we've put some visuals on there so they understand how to export the report to a PDF. So when they're starting then to think about launching the feedback session, if they want to use the PDF so they don't have to kind of deep scroll, they can. So that's session 1. Session 2 is about, looking at ideas for the feedback session itself to help them think a bit more creatively, so that they don't feel that they have to be trained facilitators. It doesn't have to be PowerPoint heavy. Obviously, it includes a quick kind of refresher on the library as well, which they may not have accessed since they've done the training. And then we've got a final session on keeping the momentum going. So we're just going to keep a cycle of those sessions going on an ongoing basis now, throughout. I think another thing that I try and do as well is socialize TED in as many, kind of more senior management forums that I can. So we have a, PCI, so People, Culture, Equality and Inclusion meeting on a monthly basis. So I'll socialize TED in there, because I think, that's how we get that kind of senior management buy-in. And I will often air concerns that I have that, maybe team leads or managers don't feel able to give themselves permission to kind of run with TED, what with all the other objectives going on. And actually, once you get that buy-in and that level, and they see the point of TED, you're more likely then to see those managers openly endorsing TED and saying, no, please make sure you take the time to build this into your schedules. So I find that really helps as well.
Yeah, excellent. Some really good ideas there. And I think you've highlighted there that importance of getting people talking about TED, and then you do get that organisational momentum with it. But I think that point about senior management being on board and perhaps helping teams to create that space and letting them know that it's okay to create some space for TED, because it can have that longer term benefits if you make it part of your practice.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a rapid improvement group meeting this morning that I wasn't aware I was able to go to, and now, I've been invited to the Teams channel, and I've asked that TED is on the agenda in there as well. Brilliant. So TED links into all the other all the other improvement work that's going on. So it's just that's finding excellent. Those niches, isn't it? And sometimes you've just got to push a few doors, but it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. I also like your idea of really openly talking around where it could go wrong as well. So a few things on the slide. I think you've come up with most of the ones that I've got on here, but the things that I see in some of our teams is that there is that challenge before you start. Teams a bit apprehensive about getting involved in it the first time. So often it can be when the results are received, as you say, if there's something a bit tricky in there, then that's when team leaders might put the brakes on, or it might come after the feedback session and then thinking, okay, we've talked about this, but then what do we actually do? Or maybe not creating the time or the structure to keep that action plan in process. And sometimes it can be when they're coming to do the second time. And as I said before, sometimes it's maybe because they've set such lofty ideas or plans the first time they did it that they're reluctant to go through TED again until they've completed everything. So the more we can just reassure them that you're doing the right thing, it's okay if it's not gone 100% as you planned, just keep on with it, keep thinking about it, and we're here to support you if you need us. So one thing I forgot to mention as well, Lee, is so obviously we've got those 3 sessions, and then when TED is more embedded, the 4th session we're hoping to introduce as well is an opportunity for people to share success stories, because I think that inspires as well. And the likelihood is those success stories will be based on people who've just kept it simple. Really good.
And hopefully that will help people out of the wobbles that they're having at the moment as well. I think the likelihood is a lot of them are overthinking it, they're overcomplicating it because they're under pressure, and they don't need to.
Absolutely. And that's where that support comes in, that first time they go through it, where there is that bit of uncertainty. And the plan is that if you can get them through that cycle and perhaps into the second cycle, they'll then have built up that bit of experience with it, that more confidence that I can have a go at this, I can try different things out, and it sort of helps to empower them. So some really good points there from everyone. So there's different types of support we can provide, I guess. There's some of it is preventative that we'll be doing beforehand. So thinking of those things in the team leader training, or perhaps those support sessions that you put on that people can drop into, hopefully before they've hit a problem. Or sometimes you might be providing more responsive support for a team who's maybe hit a barrier or has got something really tricky in the report. So I just wanted to highlight some of these things, and I think we've talked about a few of these already, but on those three themes of encouraging confidence, building capabilities, and maximising our capacity, different support mechanisms achieve this to different levels. So when we think about team leader coaching, this is a really good way to build confidence of our team leaders, reassure them that they're doing the right thing, they're on the right path. And quite often I say to team leaders that I suppose it's the old "it's okay not to be okay" sort of phrase, but really just saying to them that, okay, even if your TED's thrown up some things that might be challenges, you're in a better place now that you understand it and you've got something to build on than you were before, when you perhaps knew it existed but didn't really have any tangible evidence to be able to say, yeah, I want to do something about this, or to encourage the team to work on it as well. Coaching, it's not necessarily about building capability, so it perhaps does this to a lesser extent. It's more about providing that support. And I think the challenge with coaching is we know it can be a drain on our capacity as an OD function. So we know we can't coach 100% of our teams across the organisation. So we need to think around, how do we do it where it's most needed, and how do we do that in a way that hopefully encourages those team leaders to go on and create that momentum. Next one I've got on here is drop-in support clinics. So as we've just mentioned, this is something we've been trying at Lancs Teaching over the last few months. I think drop-in clinics are a good way to help build confidence in your team leaders, whether they come to those clinics or not. Quite often just knowing that there are those clinics available, so that if I hit a barrier in my journey with TED, then I know there's another clinic around the corner that I can just drop into and ask a quick question. So I think these things can be really powerful. I think to some extent it's an opportunity to build capabilities, because it's an opportunity where team leaders can meet other team leaders and learn from each other. But it's also somewhere where we can offer advice. So just for context, what we do at Lancs Teaching, Jude and I have run some virtual drop-in sessions for team leaders. We are running some in-person ones in the next couple of months, and just advertising them across the organisation, where as you say, people who are either on the TED journey or who are considering it can come along and talk to us, and we can really sort of build that confidence in them, really. In terms of OD capacity, it might look like a bit of a drain setting aside some set time where you've fixed just for TED, but what we found is that it's a good way that you can have a broad audience, so any number of people could drop into it. I suppose it's a bit like some of the coffee catch-ups that we run, but if there are occasions, and we did have one where nobody turned up, but that's okay, we could work on something else while we were in there and we were just available. And as I say, sometimes just knowing that those clinics are there can be really beneficial to team leaders. Another one we talk about quite a lot on these sorts of sessions is really thinking around how you align TED with your staff survey support, or with your other support mechanisms as well, and really try and position TED as something which is part and parcel of the wider offer. While this isn't specifically aimed at building confidence, it's not necessarily training team leaders. What it can do is help team leaders understand how TED doesn't need to be another thing on top of the work they're already doing. It can be part of that general staff survey approach, and it can be part of a general engagement approach. It might not specifically be geared towards building capabilities either, but it is that wider plan of work. And where it does maximise our OD capacity is it means we're not working on TED as well as staff survey. TED and staff survey are sort of one and the same thing, really. So that can really help us maximise it. And I always think staff survey is a really good indicator of where we want to target our TED support, and also maybe where we want to learn from the teams that are getting it right as well, and share some of those good news stories. Jude, you've got your hand up. Would you like to go in?
Yeah, Mark's made a really great point in the chat, that we found the staff survey provides a really strong evidence base for team leaders who are a bit reluctant to use TED.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant. And I think staff survey is that big indicator, and that does go back to the organisation. So that is something that the organisation's aware of. So that will sort of create that prompt for a team to say, we really do need to work on this. But then TED provides that great next step for teams to think, right, well, let's talk about it ourselves, and let's think what is specific to us, and again focus on what's inside our control about that, because there will be things that influence our engagement that are outside of our control. There might be a trust-wide thing, or there might be a nationwide thing. There's all sorts of things that will impact teams, but TED helps to sort of bring that back down to a team level and think, actually, what's in our capacity and our capability. Next one I've got on here is team leader community. So again, something I've talked about quite a bit on these sessions, and something we've had a lot of success with at Lancs Teaching is trying to get our team leaders to build their own community so that they can support each other. And I think the benefits to this type of approach, so for context, we have an MS Teams channel where all of our trained team leaders are in the same channel, and in there we do things like advertise events that we're running related to TED. We do things like Jude does a weekly Toolkit Tuesday bulletin where she advertises our toolkits and really raises awareness of how they can be used in different settings. But I think this approach is a great way to, again, build confidence in team leaders, because they can see other team leaders walking the walk. They hear the questions that other team leaders are asking, and it helps to build that confidence that they're doing the right thing as well. There are some opportunities to build capabilities as team leaders learn from each other, but in terms of OD capacity, this is a really good way of really maximising our capacity, because it means for us it's meant that we've got a comms channel in that MS Teams group where we can contact all of our team leaders that are registered on TED in just one post. So it's really useful to have that, but it also provides a forum for leaders to support each other. So it means that when teams are in need of support, they don't necessarily have to come through OD. So again, we're building that confidence and capability and that sort of shared learning across the organisation. Next one, workshops and events. So I suppose this one sort of comes in with what we were saying earlier, and Claire's examples of perhaps some drop-in workshops on specific topics that might be relevant to team leaders. This might also come in with your TED community as well. But what I'm referring to with this is you might have targeted learning sessions. I guess it's really a bit like today's session, really. This is a targeted topic based on the feedback we've had from our clients with TED, but you could do a similar sort of thing in your own organisation. So if there are common topics that are coming up, a few of you mentioned communication and challenging feedback, maybe. If those sorts of things are coming up, think about would a workshop on that specific topic. It might be a virtual thing or an in-person event that you might run in a common area, something like that. But those sorts of events give you an opportunity to encourage that confidence by being able to sort of myth bust some of the things sometimes, but also to address some of the things that team leaders are seeing. You're building that capability as well by providing some structured learning, maybe also signposting to relevant resources to do with that topic. But I suppose the downside with this is it can be quite time consuming for us in OD, as it will require designing, delivering and following up those sorts of teaching sessions. So in terms of that, something I wanted to signpost you to. Oh, let's get all my things up on there. So in terms of workshop events, what you'd be looking to do is bring team leaders together, cover those regular topics and reach a wider audience. And something I just wanted to highlight, I know some of you do go on our YouTube channel, but we're starting to get to a stage where I've got quite a bit of content on there now. So if you go to youtube.com/TEDengagement, we've put some of our resources on there for you to look at, and you might want to recycle some of the things that we've done. I can very briefly, I'll share just a quick look at our channel and then come back to my slides. So when you come to our YouTube, yours might look a little bit different than this, but on there we've got our lunch and learn, so these sorts of sessions. But I've started a series called TEDcast, If I come to, is it in playlists? Oh yeah, so we've got lunch and learn events, we've got TEDcast episodes or deep dive events, and some how-to videos which we're building up slowly but surely. But if I come back to the videos, just some topics that are on there already. Continuous improvement in TED, so really embedding that cycle. I've got one on dealing with difficult feedback, which is that common one that a lot of team leaders were struggling with and found a lot of benefit from that session. I've also got one for planning ahead. So we did that in January, but it can work at any time really, about putting your action plan together with TED. And another one which we did, I think this one was just before Christmas, using TED when time is tight. So for those teams who feel that time is a real barrier to doing this, that's a really useful resource. So I'd encourage you to have a look at those videos. Feel free to share them if you want. I feel like an influencer now asking you to like and subscribe, but yeah, feel free to use our stuff. That's why I put it on there, so that everyone can use it. And if there are similar topics, you know, by all means have a go at recording your own, or if you want me to record one, let me know. And you know, I'm sure it'll be things that are relevant to our team leaders at Lancs Teaching as well as your own, and we're always happy to create things which can be used more widely. Last one I've got on here, and this really, I suppose this isn't a specific support mechanism, but this is something which comes up a lot, and in conversations I see quite a lot as a support request, I guess. So this is when you get asked to do TED for a whole department, or you get asked to do TED at a big scale. Now, this has real benefits because it gives you an opportunity to encourage confidence in the senior leaders of a department. So in terms of that model, you would be working with the senior team of a department, and then really equipping them with everything they need to then be able to sort of trickle it down to their operational teams. It's actually on my next slide, I'll show you that. But in terms of the benefits of this, it does help to build capabilities that can be disseminated throughout wider departments and on a bigger scale. And whilst it might initially require quite intensive OD support to get it up and running and create a plan, it can then help you sort of have a bigger impact on a wider scale. So just to give you a bit of an insight into how that might work, I'll bring these two bits in. So when you're thinking about TED with a large scale department, you'd be focusing on those, perhaps running a TED for the senior leads in that department. So maybe best example I can think of in our trust is our theatres team. So there's lots of different theatres teams, but we ran and supported the team leaders to do their own TED, and the conversations they had were around who are they as a leadership team, how do they function well, how do they provide consistency across all the different services that they provide. But in giving them that support, we were setting them up by demonstrating the best practice when they're doing the TED. We help them plan the wider action in terms of what those steps in that further wider rollout would be. And we helped them get that consistency so that they were all approaching TED in the same way across the different teams. Once you've run that TED at that higher level in a department, what you can then do is encourage those team leaders to then go and run TED with the wider team, so at an operational level. And the benefits of that is it allows them to role model the approach so that the team can see that the leaders are involved in this and are leading on it. But it also helps to establish that accountability, shared responsibility, and to build those relationships between teams and their leaders. And also because lots of teams throughout a department are doing TED at the same time, they help to keep momentum with each other. So if any one team is struggling, there's another team leader close by who can perhaps help, and you start to build that support network within departments themselves. So again, another good sort of support approach. Okay, so we're coming to an end there, but I just wanted to ask, are there any other ways, anything we've not mentioned today that you're providing support that would be useful to share with others? Any thoughts? I don't know, Jude, has anything come up in the chat while I've been sharing those?
Just this second, came from North Cumbria. She's just said we're just starting something similar linked to the staff survey results, and we're requesting our collaborative directors, SLTs, undertake a TED and then cascade down.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think that is a really good model for those larger scale departments, because they are really complex, and it would be really difficult to give intensive OD support to every section of a department like that. So I think the challenge is to really think around, right, how can we have the maximum impact but make sure they're doing it the right way? So I think that TED at scale model, where you support the senior leads of a team and then be really clear with them that the next steps will be for them to run TED with their own teams, helps to do that. So yeah, great point, thanks. Okay, Christine, you got your hand up, would you like to come in?
Thanks, Lee. I think I've got a little bit of questions because I am currently working with a number of teams for their resurvey. Now, great. So what we're seeing as a theme is that teams that continuously practice this from the moment that they have the survey, from the debrief, and they go back and revisit this piece regularly, we do see positive outcome from the teams, and with the staff survey results are backing it up as well. Now, when there's positive or improved results on the resurvey, that's amazing. Now, I have came across a team that I'm currently, the survey literally just closed yesterday or the day before, and I can see that this is one of the team that, you know, the team leader has been coming to sit with us in the join us at the community of practice that I run monthly, where all the team leaders come together. It doesn't matter what part of the TED journey they are. So I can see that this leader is putting time and effort in this piece, and also like they are meeting regularly through the last 12 months. So they do it like every quarter at one of the academic half day, for example. Some of the sessions were supported by us, and some of the sessions that they are what we're trying to do, building capability, and therefore we'll prep them to deliver the session. Now, the staff survey results has been improved since last year.
Okay.
But it's not quite dramatically. So some of the area has actually deteriorated. But in terms of we are a team as a theme, that has improved. But now I'm looking at the resurvey result. It is maybe telling me a different story. And I'm just trying to figure out how to plan the next meeting of, you know, how do we go in with the result? My planning is that I'll look at the staff survey result and say, actually, it has improved, because we do need to go in with a little bit of positivity. But how do we sort of break it down to those deteriorated areas?
I think that's a really important point to raise that. Thanks, Christine. I think, it's really important to acknowledge that with team leaders sometimes, that your engagement scores won't always go up. And sometimes it might be due to things that are completely outside of our control. If we think about the last 12 months, NHS teams have been dealing with industrial action, really strict financial controls that they're under. So there's often things that you can do the best engagement work in the world, and sometimes results might go down due to things outside your control. I think with that team that you mentioned, what I'd be doing is reassuring them that keeping going with the TED process is really important. I think you're right, highlight the positive. So staff surveys suggesting you are heading in the right direction, but TED is suggesting that some things are declining. So let's acknowledge that, and then just use that to reflect on what might it be that's happened in the last year. What things have happened that we want to maybe try and make sure don't happen to us this year, or there are the ways that we can deal with challenges in a different way that might help us build on that. So again, it's coming back to that phrase, it's okay not to be okay. And using the TED data to really just understand the current context for the team. And I think sometimes by having that open conversation and being willing to acknowledge where things might have declined helps to create that culture in the team where you can acknowledge things but then think proactively about it. Does that help, Christine?
Yes, that's really helpful. Thank you, Lee. And it was really interesting when you asked about drop off during the journey, because I was trying to reflect, at what point we can call it a drop off. Do we call it a drop off once they have did their team leader training and not going on a TED survey? That, with that disconnection, is that a drop off? But then I know that some of our leaders is actually using the system with the tools, but they don't feel like the team is ready for the survey. But then you actually act on the point, the fact that actually we'll start looking at the system and see which user, what are they using, if they are logging on and using some tools. But yeah, it's a big one, because I feel like there is a risk here that this could be a drop off if this debrief didn't go well. With this deteriorated result.
Yeah, good point. And I think that is definitely one of those opportunities to really give that team leader that support and just reassure them that even though your results have gone down, you're doing the right thing by engaging with TED, by repeating the cycle. And the hope would be, if you keep on that, then eventually you will start to see those things go up, because it'll create that positive culture in the team. But great points. Thanks, Christine.
Thank
okay,
you.
I'm aware we're just about coming to the end. So just to really summarise some of the things that I've covered today. So when you are supporting, really give thought to how you can do that with sustainability in mind. Our goal is to enable teams without disempowering leaders by overstepping that support. But it is important to acknowledge that in some cases, and particularly the first time a team goes through TED, and in some really tricky, complex situations, absolutely that support is appropriate. But also think about those opportunities to reach wider audiences. So whether that's sharing the videos that we've got on our YouTube channel, or using things like a community or workshop events to reach as wide an audience as possible. And finally, just to signpost you to our upcoming events. So we do have a coffee catch up next month. So we postponed the one from this month, but our next one is on the 11th of June. So if you do have any specific questions, join our forum. If you've not been to one of those are open sessions. Anyone can come along, just ask questions, listen to others, join the conversation. Our next month's event is a quarterly deep dive. So that is a 2-hour session. In that, we're going to be looking into return on your investment with TED, so thinking around how you prove that impact of TED. So we're going to be focusing on that. We might come to some of your organisations and just ask for, if you've any stories or case studies that might help feed into that. So have a think about that if you can. And we'll also update you on our new reporting features that we're building into TED, and some of that 2-factor authentication rollout as well that we mentioned in our last deep dive a couple of months ago. Our next Lunch and Learn will then be in August. Gosh, no, it can't be August. There'll be one in July, I think. So there's one on the 30th of August, but I'm pretty sure I've missed out a date there. There'll be one in July. So it's been lovely to see you all today, and I look forward to seeing you at our future events. Thanks, everyone. See you again soon.
Thanks, Ray.